conduction abnormality. So what conduction abnormality means? Basically, we're saying that we do have a normal impulse formation, right? But the impulse that forms is not propagating properly. This is why we do have the problem with the impulse propagation, the impulse somehow conduction. There are two big topics of the conduction abnormalities, such as when we do have a slower conduction, some kind of blocks, or we do have a faster conduction, and these are called the pre-excitation syndrome. We will do it this one later on. Now, based on the severity of the block, the conduction slowing down, we do have a grade system. We have a grade 1, grade 2, and a grade 3. I will detail it later on. And we do have allocational things, such as the SA, such as the AV, or intraventricular, whenever we need some kind of propagation from one point to another one. Okay, let's see the types. We said that we do have a normal conduction. It's meaning that an impulse that's made in A that going to reach B with a certain velocity. You know that the slowest conduction occurs between the atrium and the ventricle in the AV junction. But we do have a conduction between the SA node and the atrium. And we do have a conduction inside the ventricle, such as the bundle branches. Now, when we do have a first degree conduction, it's meaning that every impulse that generated in A, it will get to B, but this takes a longer time. So the conduction speed is slower one, but is rhythmic because every time when we make an impulse in A, it will get to B. Now, what about the second degree one? The second degree says that we do have some unconducted beat. It's meaning that we do have a normal impulse formation in A, but sometimes the impulse cannot get to B. By definition, we cannot have more than only one unconducted beat between two conducted ones. So, of course, this is arrhythmic. This is not a normal rhythmicity. So if you're comparing the QRS complexes, the distance of the QRS complexes won't be equal. Let's look at, for example, the first type of the second degree of the blocks. It's meaning that it's called Mobitz type 1, or that has another name, it's called the Wenckebach periodicity. It's meaning that we do have a conduction. However, this conduction is gradually slowing down, and after we do have a drop beat and start from the beginning. It looks like somebody is walking, and after getting tired, and after have to have a sit, and again, when it had a rest, after can continue and go on. Such as, for example, as you do see here, the conduction is slowing down gradually, and after we have no conduction, and the first conducted beat after the unconducted one, it starts from the beginning, so that velocity is the same as the beginning, so it's faster than the previous one. That's important one. Now, another thing, the Mobitz type 2, of course, it's worsening. It's meaning there is no slowing down, so doesn't have a, let's see, a rhythmically worsening conduction. It's meaning that whenever we conducting, that's conduction speed the same, and sometimes we do have a dropped beat. This again, a rhythmic one. It's not rhythmic one. Okay, there is another type. It's called the 2-to-1, because by definition we said we can have only one unconducted beat between two conducted one, and the worst situation when we do have every second beat is not conducted, such as conducted, not conducted, conducted, not conducted. And the problem with this 2-to-1 block, especially when we do have the AV conduction abnormalities, we cannot judge whether this is Mobius type 1 or Mobius type 2. So we cannot differentiate it. This is why it's important. But of course, the clinician consider that's a worse situation, so they put a pacemaker immediately into the patient. Now, the high degree blocks, that means that we do have more unconducted beats between two conducted ones. So relatively, if you are looking at no conduction, and sometimes we do have conduction. But of course, if you consider this, a lot of time when we do not have any conduction, that period is very long. And this way, we do have a lower center, a pacemaker center, that can fire. So in this area, when we have no conduction, the patient lives rely on the escape rhythm. And sometimes, however, the beat gets through. This is why we do have different types of beats. This is what we will discuss later. Now, the third degree block is the simplest one because there is no conduction between these 2 points. So what will happen? A lower center is taking over and the patient will have an escape rhythm. Now, these kind of conduction abnormalities that I said can be anywhere, can be between the SA and the atrium, can be between the atrium and the ventricle, and can be intraventricular. Now, the easiest one to understand these different types of conduction abnormalities, the best one if we're looking at the conduction in the AV junction. Why? Because we do have a representation of 2 points. We do have a representation of the atrial activation, such as the P wave, and we do have a representation of the ventricle activation, such as the QRS complex. So when we discuss the AV conduction abnormalities, we are going to consider the relationship between E and the QRS complex. So what we evaluating? The PR interval. This is what we do. When you want to evaluate assay blocks, there is no sign of the sinus activity. There is no sign on ECG. What we do see on ECG, only the atrium. So only from the P wave, we can somehow conclude what kind of block we would have. Now, of course, the intraventricular conduction represented by the QRS complex. How wide the QRS complex? What is the shape of the QRS complex? This is how you should interpret and how you should diagnose the intraventricular conduction abnormalities. So let's start with the AV blocks. Very similarly, first degree, second degree, Mobius type 1, Mobius type 2, and the high degree AV blocks. And of course, the complete one. Now, the first degree block, meaning that every P wave gets conducted, but slower. What does it mean? It's meaning that the PR interval, that's starting from the beginning of the P wave till the beginning of the QRS complex, is longer than 0.2 second period. Now, of course, normally the PR interval is not constant, but it's never be longer than 0.2 seconds. Of course, the PR interval will depend on the heart rate. If you do have a faster heart rate, the PR getting shorter. If you do have a slower heart rate, the PR is longer. And if you are younger, the PR is getting shorter. Why? In a more advanced age, the PR is longer. Okay, but never, ever be longer than 0.2 seconds. So it's meaning one big square. Okay, as you do see here, every P followed by a QRS complex. However, the PR interval is longer. It's rhythmic. So you won't see anything else, only that the PR be longer. Now it's very nicely, you can see it. Okay, there's the T wave, P wave, QRS, and again, very similarly. So that can slow down a little bit the heart, but usually you won't see it, so it won't be bradycardic. It can be in a normal rate as well. Here, very similarly, we do have this kind of tracings. Of course, we do have something else, not only the first degree AV block, but this is how you can see. Rhythmic, yes. Heart rate, you know that. Do we have P wave? Yes. Every P followed by QRS? Yes. But the PR is longer than 0.2 seconds. This is period. This is how you diagnose first degree AV block. Now, the second degree AV block says we do have P waves, and the P's are identical. So the P made in the sinus or whenever it should made, but not every P followed by QRS complex. That's it. So when we do have this drop beat, that RR interval is longer. So this is why we do have an arrhythmic heartbeat. Now, in Mobis type 1, if you looking at the PR interval, they are not the same. So let's remember, the last conducted PR is longer than the first one. Okay, this is how you will evaluate. I will show you. And the Mobis type 2, they equal. So the last PR the same as the first one. This is how you can diagnose it. Now, Mobis type 1, this is how you can see very nicely that how the PR is getting longer and longer and longer. And another thing that is important to understand, not only the PR is getting longer and longer and longer, and after we have unconducted beat, but the RR interval is getting a little bit shorter because the P, if you do see that the QP interval is getting shorter, if you do see here very nicely. So this is not important to diagnose a first degree AV block, but this will help us to diagnose an SA block. Because if you had only a QRS complex without having any kind of P and you want to diagnose a AV block based on the RR interval, you should consider how the RR interval is changing. Now, let's looking at, this is very similarly, as you see here, identical. The PP intervals are constant. However, the PR intervals are not. And this is why I said this is a drop V if I mark with an arrow. If you're looking at the last conducted PR and compare to the first conducted PR, you will see that the last is longer than the first one. That's it. This is very important. So please do not look at how the PR is progressing, how it's getting longer, because if you do have, let's see, a 7-to-1 or 7-to-6 or any kind of conduction abnormalities, the elongation of the PR is too short. And if you want to see the difference between the first and the second and the third one, almost you cannot see it. But if you're looking at the last one and the first one, you always will see a difference. Okay. Now, this is how it's explaining why the RR interval is getting shorter. Hopefully, you went through this one, or you can accept it. Doesn't matter. Okay, this is a tracing. Rhythmic? No. Do we have P waves? Yes, we do have P waves. Let's count the interval between the P's. You do see that this is regularly coming. However, sometimes this P is not conducted. We do have a drop P. So what will we do? Looking at the last conducted one and compare to the first conducted one. And because they are not equal, the first one is shorter than the last one. This is Mobis type 1. Okay. Now, Mobis type 2, we said that there is no elongation in the AV conduction. So the PR is not getting longer. It's not changing. So the last conducted PR be the same as the first one. Of course, it's arrhythmic. But when you are looking at the P interval, yes, it's the same. The RR interval, however, is not. And importantly, look at this distance. When we do have a drop P, this distance exactly 2 Rs, as you do see here. Why, when we do have a Mobis type 1, this distance were not the same as 2R, is be shorter than 2R. Okay. And next one, the 2-to-1 AV block, every second beat is not conducted. So we do have a rhythmically coming P waves, and once we have unconducted one. Every second P is not conducted. So the RR intervals are constant. This is what we do see, and exactly twice as much as the PP interval. That's it. Okay, here, of course, is bradycardic. And as you do see, because you do have more P's, at least twice as much as the R, this is why it's 2 to 1 AV block. Now, why is it important? Why is it important? I go back to diagnose Mobius type 1 and Mobius type 2. Mobius type 1 anatomically is located proximally. So it's mostly the proximal part of the AV junction. Why? And mostly involved in the ion changes or drug effect or that so on and so on. So it's meaning that it's reversible. Why? A 2 to 1 that involves the distal part, usually close to the his, and that's due to ischemic changes. Now, what will be the consequence of it? Why? It's irreversible. So this is why you should put a pacemaker, because only a lower center, only the ventricle can take over the escape rhythm, and the ventricular escape rhythm is very slow, so it cannot maintain a normal cardiac output that is enough to maintain a normal life of the patient. This is why they need to put a pacemaker immediately into the patient who has gradually develop a Mobius type 2 AV block or 2 to 1 AV block. Very similarly to the high degree block, it's more severe one, and of course it's a pacemaker indication. And what did I say? When we do have a high degree AV block, it's meaning that more P is unconducted, that we do have more than only one unconducted piece between two conducted ones, and we do have an escape rhythm, because that's slowing down the heart very much. This is why an escape rhythm is coming. So what we will see, we do see P waves, and that piece comes regularly. And when we do have an escape rhythm, it looks like we do have a normal rhythm, of course, a slower one. And sometimes when we do have a conduction, that's called the fusion beat, or that's a capture beat. Now, what is the difference between the capture and the fusion beat? Capture beat is meaning that the supraventricular impulse goes through the AV junction, and that makes it arrhythmic. The fusion beat means that when it's conducted through, we do have a escape bit, and this escape bit plus the capture bit, it will activate the ventricle together. So some part of the ventricle was activated by the ventricular escape bit plus, and some part was activated through the conducted bit. This is why it's okay, this fusion bit is rhythmic. It's coming at the same time when the escape bit, but the shape be different from the escape bit. And the capture bit, that's be narrow because that's a supraventricular bit. Previously, we learned that the difference between a ventricular and the supraventricular bit. Ventricular one is wider one, and the T is inverted. Why a supraventricular narrow, and the T usually is positive. So, third degree, very simple. We do have only an escape rhythm that can, let's see, can generate it by the ventricle, or sometimes it can generate in the lower part of the junction. The difference, if we do have a ventricular escape bit, for sure it's wide and the T is negative. However, when we do have a lower AV junctional rhythm, the QRS is narrow, but you do not see, let's see, a P that precedes or follows the QRS complex. And as you do see here, the P, the rate of the P's completely in proportional to the RR interval. This is why you do not have any relationship between the P and the QRS complex. Now, this is how you diagnose, and rhythmic for sure is rhythmic. So first degree is rhythmic, second degree is not rhythmic, 2 to 1 is rhythmic, high degree is not rhythmic, and third degree is rhythmic again. This is will help you to diagnose it. Okay, go on with, okay, assay block. Now this is what is different and difficult basically to diagnose. First degree SA block cannot be diagnosed based on the 12 leads ECG, because whenever we do see the P, it's meaning that the impulses get to the atrium. So the first degree that is slower, nobody can see it because that's be rhythmic, and we do see the normal PP interval. Second degree says that sometimes we do see P, but sometimes we don't have P wave, because if the impulse doesn't get out from the SA, there is no P wave. So what will happen? We do have a period when there is no P. Of course, and the P usually is not followed by QRS complex. So it's meaning if you are looking at the P intervals, there is an area when there is no P, no QRS. Now let's go back and think about the AV block. And we said that in Mobitz type 1, the RR, when we do not have, let's see, conduction, that distance is less than 2R. Similarly, in Mobitz type 1, the PP interval, when it's missing, that PP is not as much as twice as the last PP. Why in Mobitz type 2, that's be the same. Of course, third degree, there is no P wave. We do have a lower center taking over. That's be the junctional escape rhythm. Okay, here is what we do have. Okay, let's see the P. There is nothing as a P. And what you have to do, these P's should be less than twice as this P. But if you are looking at how the PP interval is getting shorter, as you do see, this is how you diagnose a Mobitz type 1 SA block. This scheme is identical with that one, with a nice, okay, cartoon, Mobitz type 2. That's meaning that exactly we do have twice P's right here, and this is how you diagnose it. Okay, good, let's go on. Now, intraventricular blocks, now this is what we will see a lot of times. So, again, it can be first degree, second degree, third degree, doesn't matter. But usually what you do see and what you diagnose, it's meaning a complete third degree intraventricular blocks, and that gives you the different pattern, and of course it's elongate the QRS complexes. We do have, depending on how many branches are missing, we have a simple right bundle branch block when only the right bundle is blocked. We do have a left bundle branch, as you see here, but the left bundle, as you do see, they're composed of at least two different areas, such as the anterior fascicles and the posterior fascicles. When we're talking about left bundle branch block, we're talking about the completely missing anterior and posterior fascicles. Okay, this is what you do. We do have bifascicular block. What bifascicular blocks mean? There are two fascicles is missing. It's meaning that we do have a right bundle branch is missing, plus either anterior or posterior fascicle is missing. This is how you diagnose it. Trifascicular block, we do have a right bundle branch block, we do have a left anterior or posterior, and we do have a first degree AV block. This is the trifascicular block, but we will get to this point. And of course, the cause of this intraventricular conduction usually is ischemic or myocardial MI. Now let's see the normal ventricular depolarization. What is the first one? The first one, when we do have an impulse that is getting from the left bundle toward the right side. Because if you go back to this one, you do have the septal fascicles that is given by the left bundle. So left bundle will give you the septal activation. And of course, the septal activation, it's represented with the positivity in V1 and the negativity and the Q wave in V6. After we do have both right and the left side simultaneously activated, but because the left side is thicker, more electric activity, this is why we do have an axis, a bipole, that pointing from right to the left. So this is why on the right side, we do have a deep S wave. Why on the left side, we do have a tall R wave. So by definition, RS and QR complex can be diagnosed. Now, One thing that we should introduce, and this is why it's easy to understand, and that's called the ventricle activation time or intrinsic deflection, as you learn in physiology. Now, what does it mean? It's meaning that whenever we do have an impulse that is coming toward the electrode, so it's activating the muscle under the electrode, that's be always positive. However, when this area that is like under the electrode is activated, everything goes away. So this is this is the time that is needed to activate this area under the electrode. That's called the ventricular activation time. And this is different in different leads. In V1, this is less than 0.04, it's less than 1 millimeter. However, in V6, it's more because it's on the top of the R wave, so it's less than 0.06. Now, this is the normal value. If we do have a conduction abnormality on the right side, the ID time or the ventricular activation time is elongated on the right side. If we do have a left altered side, this be elongated on the left side. You will see immediately. What will happen in right bundle branch block? Okay, the septal activation is abnormal? No, the septal activation be normal because the left bundle is still there. Okay, so we do have the initial R in V1 and the Q wave in V6. Okay, next one, the left bundle, the left ventricle activated the same way. It's okay, that's no. So we do have a deep S wave and we do have an R wave. However, what will happen with the right side? The right side is activated from the left one. So we do have a slow muscle to muscle activation that comes from the left to the right. So this is why we do have a wider and longer last part, a positive last part in V1, and a slow, slurred S wave on the left side in V6 or V5 or lead number 1 or AVL. Those are the left ventricle leads. So look at the ID time on the VAT. As you do see, the ventricle activation time, of course, the last R is longer than 0.04 on the right side, but nothing happened on the left side. So, but the pattern is important. In V1, you do see the RSR complex, or you do see a nudged R complex. Why? On the left side, we do see this slurred, wider S wave. Okay, this we're not going. As you do see here, very interesting. Look at the V1. This is the RSR complex. Or on the left side, you do see the deepened and wider R wave, or V5, V6, again, very similarly. Okay, incomplete. Now, what the complete and incomplete means? The complete means that completely out of the right bundle. This is why we do have a longer QRS complex, longer than 0.12. Incomplete means that is not longer than 0.12 or 0.1, but the pattern be identical. So we do have an RSR pattern, but the duration of the QRS is not longer than 0.1 second. Similarly to the left bundle can be incomplete and complete, but let's see what will happen when we do have a left bundle bench block. Is the septal activation altered? Yes, because it's missing the bundle. That's a left bundle. Okay, so only the right side can activate the left part of the septal part. This is why everything is started negatively in V1 and positively in V6. And of course, later on, a little notch can be seen when the right ventricle is activated, but usually it's taking a part of the septal activation. Almost you cannot see it. But later on, from the right side to the left one, you do see a long and wide R wave. So you do see it's a W or QS complex in V1 and an R, notched R in V6. And of course, the ID time now is okay because the ID time is 0 and we said that less than 0.04. And on the left side, we do have a wider R wave, a wider ventricular activation time. This is how you diagnose. Okay, good. Go on. Very similarly, you do see this M nudged R wave on the left side and QS complex on the right side. This is how you diagnose it. Now, anterior and posterior hemiblock, when we do have a hemiblock, If you do have an anterior fascicle, that only the anterior fascicle is missing, it's meaning that the duration of the QRS complex is not altered. So the QRS is less than 0.1 second. However, because the anterior part is missing, only from the posterior part can serve as an activation. So this way we do have a pathological, what kind of deviation? We do have a left deviation. So if we do have a pathological left deviation, we have to think about that we could have a septal, anteroseptal or anterofasciculus problem. So, okay, I will show you on the camera and you will understand. Maybe hopefully, well, I think it's not. Okay, this is, okay, I have to turn to the other side. Hopefully you can, oops, not seeing too much. I think my video is changed, so I have to do this way. Okay, now, the heart is placed in your chest. Basically, you can hug your heart, okay? So the heart goes from the right to the left, and up and down and back to the front. So if you hug your heart, and everything that goes on the anterior in going, that's a left anterior fascicles, this is how it's running, and the posterior that's running from the right to the left. If you do have an anterior is missing, it's meaning that the activation is going from the right to the left. And this is why you do have a pathological left deviation. If the posterior is missing, the anterior will activate that muscle, and it's meaning it's coming from left to the right. So you do have a pathological right deviation. Hopefully you will understand. And how do you know that which arm is up? Usually the mother holding the baby close to the heart. This is how you should hug your heart, close to the left side, and you will know that that's the anterior, that's the posterior, and you always have your arms with you. Okay, now let's go on. Okay, back. This is what you will see. Nothing, the QRS is okay. This is here is wider a little bit, but you do see lead number 1 is positive, AVF is negative, lead number 2 negative, so that's the pathological left deviation. When we do about posterior, exactly the opposite one, we do have a pathological right deviation. Lead number 1 is negative, that should be enough. And sometimes AVR is positive, it's meaning that more than 120. This is how you diagnose the QRS. It should not be wide. Now, bifascicular block. We said right bundle branch block or left anterior or left posterior hemiblock. Most commonly anterior because the same artery supplies these two areas. You do see the pattern, the QRS complex, as you do see in V1, RSR, plus the axis, 1 positive, AVF is negative, and lead number 2 is negative, so it's a pathological left deviation. This is what means it's a bifascicular block. Okay, it can have a posterior hemiblock with a right bundle branch block. You do see the pattern in V1, plus you do see this in lead number 1. We do have a right deviation. Trifascicular block, usually what we said, it can be together with the right bundle branch block and hemiblock plus a first degree AV block, but it can be different. Can be, for example, if you do have a left bundle, because left bundle branch block means that anterior posterior missing is a bi, plus an AV block, that means the 3. Or if you do have alternating the right bundle branch block pattern plus a left bundle branch pattern, that again can be considered as a trifascicular block as well. Okay, some picture. Okay, good. All right, now let's summarize a little bit about the pre-excitation syndrome when we do have a faster conduction. Only one area that we can have a faster conduction, and that's the AV junction. There are 2 major types of this pre-excitation syndrome. Of course, there are more, but what we learned, we do have the WPW syndrome or the LGS syndrome. Very common one, the WPW syndrome. LGL is not as common as the WPW. We do have an accessory bundle and muscle tie bundle that connecting the atrium to the ventricle through the annulus fibrosis. So it's connecting muscle to muscle. LGL is meaning that atrial muscle connected to the bundle of His. There are some other Mannheim fiber, but we don't need to learn about it. Now let's see what will be the consequence when we do have this bundle of CAN that connecting the atrial muscle to the ventricular muscle. Okay, let's look at. First of all, the impulse that made in the atrium that generates the P wave, so it's formed the P wave. The atrium is activated. But the atrium, when this atrial activation is reaching the AV junction and reaching the bundle of CAN. Of course, in the AV do have a slow conduction, so nothing happening as slow. But in the bundle of CAN is the muscle type immediately taking over to the ventricle, and we start a delta wave, and the leftover part of the QRS complex is activated through the AV junction impulse. So it's meaning we do have a widening of the first part of the QRS, and the PR is getting shorter. So this is what we do see, this delta wave. Okay, so certain part of the ventricle activated through the muscle through this bundle of CAN. So we do have this delta wave. This delta wave can occur in anywhere. Maybe you don't see on the 12 leads, but you do see only in the chest leads, or maybe in some AVL or AVR, and you have to consider and look at the PR interval. The PR cannot be shorter than 0.12 seconds because that's the normal duration of the P wave. This is what you will see, a little upside, okay, going up and upward widening of the QRS complex. There are two types depending on where the CAN bundle is located. If the CAN bundle located on the left side, it's meaning that in V1, we do have a high R wave. So the delta wave will start positively, everything from coming from the left to the right. Why? Even it's located on the right side, everything is going from right to the left. So it's be similar to a left bundle branch block. But as you do see here in V1, a negativity, but this CAN bundle can be anywhere. But what is the problem? What is the problem with this WPW syndrome? And LGL, we do have a short PR, but the QRS complex is narrow. You won't see this kind of pacing. Now, what will be the consequence of this WPW? Basically, we do have two parallel pathways that with different velocity, different refractor periods, and that can initiate the re-entry phenomenon. Now, this is the tachyarrhythmias that develop. This is called the AVRT tachycardias. And the problem is if somebody has, for example, an atrial fibrillation, that atrial fibrillation can go through to the muscle. So we do not have the protective effect of the AV node, and that can initiate a ventricular fibrillation easily. One good news, this CAN bundle does not conduct the same way backward and forward. So this is why very rare when the atrial fibrillation can lead to ventricular fibrillation in this patient. Now, there are two types of this kind of AVRT tachycardias, depending on how the ventricle is activated and how the bundle, CAN bundle, is leading the charge. If we do have a circle that the AV junction activates the ventricle and the CAN bundle reuptakes the charge, this is called the orthodromic AVRT tachycardias. And of course, because the muscle activated through the normal conducting system, the QRS complex is narrow. However, in another way, when everything was activated through the bundle of CAN and the AV was reuptaking the charge, that's be the antidromic, and that's be the wide QRS. It be identical with the ventricular tachycardia because the QRS be wider, and of course, every part of the ventricle activated to the ventricle. That's difficult to diagnose or difficult to separate from a ventricular tachycardia. But if you apply carotid massage, of course, because AV is involved in the story, that can stop this kind of AV tachycardia. Okay, that's orthodromic and antidromic when we do have a wide QRS. That's it, period. We do have another one the last time we discussed when we do have this re-entry phenomenon inside the AV node, and that's the AV and RT tachycardias. So we do not have these accessory pathways, and usually inside the AV node, we do have this kind of re-entry phenomenon, and supraventricular tachycardia, mostly the all supraventricular tachycardias occurring with this way, the AV and RT tachycardias. That's it. Okay, but you cannot differentiate. It only looks like as a supraventricular tachycardias. That's it, period. This is 101. Who has 101?
Me, Daniel Alksus.
Okay, good. So let's do it.
So in this one, I counted the BPM. It was approximately 90.
Mm-hmm.
It had, it's rhythmic, appears to be rhythmic. The P wave is present, appears uniform as well. Axis is normal, so it looks like 60 degrees approximately, based on the fact that the AVL is the most like isoelectric. The QRS appears to be normal, but the PR interval was extended. It was approximately 0.25 seconds, which is long. So it would be a type 1 block and signal conduction would be slow.
Okay. So the first degree AV block, this is what you meant. Okay.
Yes.
That's it. Period. Okay. Very good. All right. Let's go through 102. Anybody? Okay. 103.
Yes, me.
Okay. Could you give me a little time, please? Oops, I'm going back. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm back. So that was 104, yes?
Mine is 103.
103. Okay, I'm going back to 103. That's it.
Yes. So first of all, it's non-rhythmic. Then heart rate looks like 50 BPM. And then about the axis, the first lead is positive and then AVF is also positive. So it looks like normal axis. Then about the PR interval.
Okay.
The first one is about around the 0.2 second, but second is 0.24, and then third or fourth are 0.28. So it's extended the PR interval. Then after the last impulse, their P wave is existed, but the QRS is dropped. So I would like to say it's a second degree AV block, Morbis type 1.
Okay, so this is what I said when you do not only the elongation of the PR, but we do see, let's see, a unconducted P. This is the unconducted one, and compare the last PR to the first one. Yes, this is what we have to do. And if the last one is longer than the first one, you can say that's a Morbis type 1 AV block. Okay.
Okay.
Good, very good. Oops. Wait a minute, I have to close this annotation. Okay, 104. Anybody has?
Yes.
Okay.
So I said that mine was not rhythmic and it had a beat about 60 beats per minute with the normal axis. We can see that there's progressive lengthening of the PR interval. And after a couple of beats, one of the P wave is not followed by a QRS complex, so there's a drop QRS complex. So I concluded that it was a secondary degree AV block Mobis type 1.
Mhm. Exactly. That's it. Okay, good. Let's see. Next one, 105. Anybody had?
Yeah, that was mine.
Okay.
It's a bit similar to what she said, but as I can see in mine, I saw that I have bradycardia. It's arrhythmic, and I was a bit confused. I did see that it's like from my diagnosis, it was 2-to-1 AV block, but I wasn't fully sure if it's Mobitz type 1 or 2, because when I looked at the PR intervals, then I remember that in Mobitz type 1, they say that as we go further in the cycles, the PR gets longer and longer. And here it got shorter. If I look at, for example, at lead 2, it got shorter and shorter. So I want to say that it's type 2, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Let's see. Where are the P waves? Okay. Now we should consider what the PP interval. Okay. I would say that these are the PP intervals, and sometimes you do see a P wave here, for example. See, that's a P wave right here.
Yeah.
And if you consider now, you compare it, you can see immediately what the difference is, because that's not conducted. Okay, for sure. This again, not conducted.
Yeah.
That's a conducted. Okay, conducted, not conducted. Okay, which not conducted, conducted, not conducted, conducted. I don't think that is a conducted one. So, or maybe that's a conducted, but we do see another piece right here. So that's a difficult, but that's possible is a Mobitz type 1 AV block, because that's alternated. But another problem, later on we will see that we do have a very nice ST elevation in lead number 2 and lead number 3 and in AVF. So that's an inferior MI. So this is why we do have this kind of discrepancy in this picture. So let's consider that's a Mobitz type 1. Okay,
Mobitz type
but
1,
it can be okay, but it can be a Mobitz type 1 that worsening and be a Mobitz type 2 later on a 3rd degree, and especially here the ischemia can initiate this one very easily. So that's a possibility.
Okay.
But you have to see a longer interval to see it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see 106. Nothing. Okay. 107.
This is mine.
Okay, good.
So when I looked at it at first, I wanted to determine if I have tachycardia or bradycardia, or is it normal, and it looked like I had bradycardia. And then I looked at the electrical axis, and it seemed okay between 0 and 90. And when I tried to determine, I determined it was 2-to-1 AV block, but I couldn't determine if it's Mobitz type 1 or 2.
Exactly.
So I could use your help to determine it, if it's type 1 or 2.
No, you cannot. Based on this 12-lead ECG, there is no way, unless you do an anamnesis that the patient was taking a drug, or maybe the potassium level or other level is altered. No, you cannot diagnose it.
Oh, okay.
So 2-to-1. Only one thing that you do see, that the P wave is a little bit wider. As you see here, I show you it's here. That's a P. That's wide P. And that can represent an atrial enlargement, especially the left atrial enlargement. But later on, we will learn it. Okay. But it's not a normal P for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. 108. Only one thing that you do see that. Yes, it's yours.
Yes, this is mine. I'd like to highlight based on the lead 2, because it shows most of it. And I'd like to highlight the 3 points. And first is, as we can see, it's a rhythmic, but it's abnormally bradycardia, because I see that mostly 4-to-1 conduction. So which means
because
every 4P, each 4P and has 1 QRS. So there is a QRS, which is not escape. So we have a SA, order, and QRS.
Yeah. So
4 to 1, I can say second point is high degree, not third degree, because we have QRS here.
okay, so that's a high
And
degree AV block,
high-
4 to 1 conduction. That's very good.
Yes. And I see another point. I have abnormally longer QRS. QRS, a normal person has a 0.1 second, but I see here 0.2 second. It's prolonged. I don't know whether I should highlight it or not, but that expresses some kind of heart failure. And
No, you don't need the highest sphere. Why?
Okay, and I see and that each TMP they overlaps here. I don't know where. And then Y is bradycardia, and I counted it has about 33 BPM, beat per minute. And
Yeah,
the
that's
normally,
yes.
which is a severe bradycardia, and the patient needs the machine pacemaker right away.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, yeah. And it looks like the QRS is wider. That possible can be due to, for example, if you look at in V1, that's an RSR pattern. It can be due to a right bundle branch block as well. So beside of the patient has a high degree, they do have a little problem with the right bundles as well. So that can be the reason why we do have a wide QRS. Okay. 109. Anybody?
Yes, it's me.
Okay.
So in this ECG, we have a regular RR interval, but the heart rate it's slower than the normal range. And there is a prolonged PR interval because it's longer than 5 squares every time, but it is constant in all of the beats, and every P wave is followed by a QRS complex, which made me think that it can be a first degree AV block. No.
No, because look at this one. Okay, the rate, if you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so 300 divided by the 7, and it should be close to how much? It's 40 something. Okay, now, do we have P waves? Yes, we do have P waves. Look at these P waves. Yes, we do have P waves. However, looks like it's almost, you should look at the all, see? See, there is no connection between the P's and the QRS complex. But
So
the
if there's no
RR,
connection.
so this is the dissociation of chords, so it's meaning the third degree AV block with a junctional escape rhythm. So it's a lower junctional escape rhythm.
Okay, I see.
So this is why it is a long strip, the same, lead number 2. And by looking at the P's and the PR, you can see that the PR is looks like shorter, see? And if you do see this kind of feeling that the PR is getting shorter, for sure it's a third degree. Okay, there is no way that you can have the PR is getting shorter unless you do have a third degree.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
you're welcome. Okay, I have to remove this.
Excuse me.
Yes?
Could you please explain this one again? I'm not sure I understood it fully.
Okay, now we do see rhythmic heartbeats. Yes, the RR intervals are constant. This is one. Okay. If you are looking at, you get a paper if you do have a tracing and mark the RR, and after you can shift it. If it's the same, fine, it's rhythmic. After look at the PP interval. This is rhythmic as well. Yes. However, if you look at the rate of the P, it won't be proportional to the rate of the RR. Now, it's simple. Look at the PR. Okay, look at the PR. Maybe these P are the same, and this is not conducted. Okay. But here it's getting shorter. See, this PR is getting shorter. And after a while, if you continue looking at this, oops, look at this one. The P is getting inside the QRS complex. Can you see it?
Yes.
So it's meaning there is no connection between P and QRS. So because it works independently, because if you had any kind of conduction that made it arrhythmic, if it would be a high degree, okay? So this is why I said at the beginning, look at the rhythmicity. If we do have a first degree AV block, that's rhythmic because every P followed by the QRS complex. If you do have second degree, because when we do not have conduction, that's part make arrhythmic. High degree, again, it's arrhythmic because we do have an escape rhythm. Yes, it's rhythmic, but whenever we do have a conducted bit, that makes it arrhythmic. Okay, and the high and when we do have a third degree, again is rhythmic because there is no connection between the atrial and the ventricle contraction. So, and the ventricle escape rhythm is rhythmic. Okay, so if you had a high degree, that's arrhythmic. Third degree, rhythmic.
Sorry, so in this case, we have an AV junctional block, a third degree block, but also an
Yes.
escape junctional rhythm.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes, that's it. Okay. 10. I don't know whether anybody had it or not. Oops, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Now, if you get closer to the microphone, yes, we do see. Okay, now we hear you.
All right. So I had this one. I said that it is rhythmic and that the heart rate is 40 beats per minute around, and that the axis is normal. And since the distance between the P waves changes and that there are some unconducted P waves as well, I think, then I think it's third
Only
degree.
one unconducted bit? No, there are more. None of the P conducted. This is why you said third degree.
Right. Sorry. So yes.
So it looks like there is, yeah, there is no connection between P. It's rhythmic. Again, it's rhythmic. And now we should find, that's fine, guys. Here we do see the PP interval. And after you should switch it and you will see that some P is inside the QRS complex. And this rhythmic. So it's not a high degree because that's made it arrhythmic. So this is why you said that's a third degree AV block. And again, that's a junctional escape rhythm, a low junctional escape rhythm, because we will learn later on that ischemic changes, ST elevation, and so on, only can be seen when we do have a supraventricular impulse formation. Okay, good. All right, 111.
That's me.
Okay.
So first, I think it's a rhythmic with heart rate about 70 beats per minute. And then I could see a P wave in lead 2. Also, I could see in V1 a QS complex and in V6 a prolonged ID time in V6, meaning that the wide QRS as well. So I am thinking it's a left bundle branch block, but I'm not sure.
Well, it's okay. First of all, if you are looking at lead number 1, it could be a little bit nudged, I cannot say that is not a left bundle branch block, but that's an incomplete left bundle branch block. But what else you can see beside of this incomplete left bundle branch block? What else?
Maybe a prolonged, like longer PR interval?
That's it. This is the PR that is longer. Yes, that's it.
So if it's PR interval and almost incomplete left bundle branch block, could we say it's like a trivascular?
Trifascicular.
Thing?
Yes, you can say it. Okay. All right. Okay. 112. Nobody. Okay. 113.